We're streaming.
All right. So, welcome, Michael. We are back on our second YouTube live stream and really happy to have you here.
Good to be here again. Happy to see you on Monday.
Yes. So today we were hoping to take some of the things that we had talked about a little bit more generally last week and talk about them more specifically. Oh, shoot.
What was that?
that was our live playing in the background.
Okay,
Anyway, we're talking about how we were welcome. Oh no, I'm doing it again. All right, got it. So we're going to take some of the things that we're talking about more generally last week and talk about them a little bit more specifically, maybe with some stories so people can kind of relate to some of these broader concepts more specifically, and hopefully see some examples of how they could apply them in their business so that they could get just ideas of how they could increase their company's value and be able to kind of just apply some of these things we've been talking about. And one of the things that we've been talking about is kind of like, how do you even define something like brand? And one of the examples that we often use, or the definitions that we often use, is the conversation that people are having about you when you're not in the room. I think it's like a Jeff Bezos quote, but a bunch of people have said similar things. And I think it's a great idea, like just to kind of get people to think a little bit more broadly about brand. Like we had talked a little bit about some brand touch points last week where, like your website is your brand and, your logo needs to be cleaned up. But at the end of the day, it really is what people are talking about and how you're influencing those conversations. And also all of the things you need to be paying attention to, because you can influence those conversations, but you can't necessarily control the conversations. Like what you put in your brochure is not necessarily what people are saying about you. Yeah. And I'm curious how you've seen that lived out in companies that you've been working with, and how you think that enters into the valuation conversation.
So it's funny, I got a great example I got a call last week from one of my clients, and then they're in the waterproofing business, right? Not what we would ever consider like the most sexiest and branding company to work with, right? They work with what they call black goopy stuff, but their special purpose has always been, we deliver white glove service in a black goopy world, which is great. But their BHAG, and we love BHAGs, like those big, hairy, audacious goals that we set for organizations when we start working with them. Their BHAG is, we want to be the go-to waterproofing company in New England. And so last week I got a call from the owner of the company. He said, guess what? He said, we got a new prospect in who talked to us, and they said they were asking around about who we got to go to, and everyone said, you were the go-to waterproofing company. You're the ones we need to talk to. And it just was like, so like, aha moment that that this was happening in their business, right? That the things they were focusing on were starting to drive that brand, that communication of how they were thought of and perceived. So, and that all came from being like understanding where they wanted their company to go, and then starting to align their brand to it.
Yeah. And I'm sure that, like, again, it's not just aligning the brand. Like, I'm sure for a company like that, a logo refresh is going to probably have like the most minimal impact on that conversation possible. But do you have any examples of like things that they were doing that helped to create that conversation, that were influencing the brand in those more intangible ways?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's because of how engaging they are with their clients as problem solvers, right? So it's the thought process. It's waterproofing, right? It's this black stuff that just goes up on the walls. What's the big deal? But there's a lot that goes into that as to product selection in the application, and knowing when to do it and not to do it. And it can actually be a pretty complex undertaking. And so they're recognized because of the knowledge that they have of the product mix and how to apply it and all those things. So they're really, in some ways, a solutions provider. Mm-hmm. So they're not coming in with just the lowest cost and we're going to throw this up on the walls. They're there as a value for their customers. So by aligning the organization into like lots of emphasis on training and understanding materials and being really honest with the client about the application, why it's going to cost this and that. They've created this trust factor
Mhm.
that now when someone is thinking in that industry about, God, I need waterproofing, where do I go? Oh, you got to go to them because they are the go-to in this industry because there's no one else like them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And also, if somebody has had an extraordinary experience, they've solved some kind of problem for them, then it starts to create that conversation where when somebody's looking for a reference or referral, you're going to refer the person who solved the problem for you, not someone who
Exactly.
just kind of sold you something. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
so it was great. This prospect got referred by other contractors,
Yeah.
so theoretically competitors of theirs, referred them to this company. So, it was like one of those aha moments for us, like, all right, see, this is how everything that we're working on is starts to flow down, because to your point, it's not just about a name or a logo or a brand, it's about how do you deliver on that promise. And see
Yeah. And I
like,
think one of the things that we find that most small businesses struggle with, that the big companies that they're competing against can do maybe a little bit more easily, are the two things that you really need to build a strong brand, where you need clarity and you need consistency. And if you can have those two aspects, like that's what the big guys are doing. They're super clear on who their target market is, and they are consistent as heck in, every single touch with that customer being that same consistent, clear message and a very uniform experience. And I think one of the things that smaller businesses struggle with are those two things, clarity and consistency. And so I think it's one of the reasons why influencing the conversation in the way that you were talking about is so difficult, feels like such an uphill battle, but it's really not as complicated as we want to make it seem. It just means that we do have to have that North Star of, we want to be known as X. And then you do have to be really consistent in that alignment.
yeah.
And,
Yeah,
and
another one that's worked really well is, one of our longtime clients when we first started with Telemon / Amplified Insurance. When we started with them and set their BHAG, it was to be recognized as independent insurance rock stars. And so that starts the drive of the conversation. What does that mean? How does it flow down into our organization? So it got to the point they even renamed part of their company Amplified, right? It's geared towards the rock star mentality. Their conference rooms are, like Zeppelin and Springsteen and things like that. So there's this whole mindset as to how they do things. So that brand has become, wasn't necessarily thought of to be the brand first and foremost, but it was like, we want to be thought of as rock stars. We need to deliver as rock stars, and we need to communicate out that we are rock stars through our brand. And they've put all those pieces together, and they've grown, had great growth. In the intangibles that it delivers on is like, people want to go to work for them now, right?
yeah.
People, seek them out, or, and people want to stay. So the turnover's down. There's all these, intangibles that, when you talk value in a sale, like those things pop up, because we're looking at, well, do we have a good, strong management team? God, there's a lot of turnover. That's bad. Do your customers like you? When you got a great brand and you're delivering on it, all those things line in place, which leads to, we're more profitable. We get a higher multiple, which leads to more value. So it's not like I can go and say, oh yeah, well, 12% of that or 15% of that value came from the brand, but I can see it across the enterprise as that made it an attractive acquisition versus somebody else.
Yeah, and I think again, it's like if you think of the brand as the clarity and the consistency and who they are and who their customer is and what that experience is, then that ability to execute clarity and consistency kind of becomes interlinked with everything else that you do. And I know Telemon, I think they're an interesting example. I've had some lengthy conversations with their chief culture officer, and
Right.
that was kind of where they started, was not with the logo, the tagline, all the external messaging, but they really concentrated on culture first.
Yeah.
And I think that that's such a great approach, because it really means that you're kind of concentrating on like making sure that we deliver first and foremost. And then the conversation just becomes then it's just how do we get the message out there? And yeah.
And that's become a huge selling point for them when they go out now, is that culture, because when that culture reflects that brand. And so they've got their culture book when they go out and they meet with prospects and they talk about all the things they do. It's all part of their brand now, is built into that. Um, so it's fascinating to watch them. Like, and Kalina is a great example of their chief culture officer. She gets asked to go speak to people now, and can you help us with this? Who goes to their insurance company for that?
Right.
But it's now a piece. They go, yeah, these guys get it. I want to do business with them, because they are different. They're forward thinking. So it comes through in the brand, to the things they work on culturally and being rock stars.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that, like, being the rock star is it's such an external reputation type thing, but it's also so dependent on people consistently going above and beyond and having that performance, that regular, like, over delivering and things like that, that can only come, if you tried to say we're the rock stars and then had an experience on the back end that was not a rock star experience, that could have completely backfired on them if they had kind of jumped the gun, which again, I think that that's where a lot of small businesses and entrepreneurs in particular get really stuck, is like, I want, I want this to be our culture and I want this to be our brand. And I'm just going to start saying those things
Right.
instead of, even appointing a chief culture officer is a tough thing for a small business to do. So maybe
Yeah,
not.
no, I think your point. I think with a lot of small businesses, they think it's just, well, if we get the marketing people in here and they'll put this together and boom, it's done. And it's really, just part of the process. But brand has got to be reflective of who you are as an organization and what you stand for, and where you want to go. And that's what delivers the value in our world when we get into the M&A conversation is, are you consistently executing on what you say you are? When I talk to your customers, because that's part of the due diligence process for a lot of these, what are they going to say? Are they really going to align with that brand message that you're telling me? Or are they going to be like, oh, these guys are horrible. They don't respond to phone calls, and they've always got excuses and whatever it might be that I don't want to hear. So, which
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what's interesting for us, like one of the things that I'm always scanning for when I'm talking to potential clients is every once in a while, we'll come up with people who are like, oh, like we are the best kept secret in our industry. And they've been like, they've been working on the product or the people or whatever for so long that they are, very internally focused, or, are kind of like expert in that whatever piece of industry that they do. Oftentimes it's like companies that are run by engineers are the
yeah,
ones who say this, like, we're excellent at what we do. It's just nobody knows about us. And I feel like for us, that's one of the best opportunities that we have because, okay, well, let's just get that secret out there. That if companies have been focusing on that perfection internally, then the brand piece of it becomes kind of like the easiest thing to do. You're just kind of putting together a communications plan and getting the word out, versus companies who haven't spent the time doing that groundwork and are trying to like build a brand and then backfill the rest, which just doesn't work as well.
no, and it's funny as I think about a lot of the BHAGs that we've built for our clients over the years. A lot of them are reputation driven. We
Mm,
want to be perceived as, we want to be understood.
mm,
Um, and they've got to do the work behind that while they're doing the brand work, right? We've got one that they want to be recognized as the same level like a Bain or McKinsey Consulting,
mhm.
mentioned in the same breath. That's, you know, you've got a lot to do on that value delivery side, but also then there's this whole other segment. You got to get out the word that you can deliver on that. And that's when that, I think you said the conversations that are happening when you're not around start to happen. And those are the
Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious what your process is like when you're helping companies define that, BHAG for themselves, kind of like what that North Star is. I know we've been through it together, but I'm curious whether that's morphed over the years or if it changes based on the company, or if you have any like tips if people are trying to find that North Star.
I mean, it's still it's kind of a crapshoot. I hate to say, like the exercise, because it's like, all right, we want you to think something that's really big and bold and audacious for you, but yet also make it realistic, but we're going to strain for it. So it takes a lot of thinking for people to go like, all right, what would be really cool if in 10 years, if we're having a, glass of champagne looking back, that we've accomplished? And, they all want to start with like, oh, we're going to do $20 million in revenue or this, and that's okay. But I want it to be more aspirational. So we start to think about it, and the best way to do it is bring in companies who built them and say, look at what they're doing, and, tell me what would be really cool. And like, we have one that wants to be like recognized like the Patagonia of their industry.
Mm.
When you think about what that entails for them as they start to look at everything from what types of products they're delivered to, how their customer service, to what charities they contribute to, and the messaging, that's like, wow, that's really aspirational to get there. And there's so much work that's got to go into it to get there. So it's really fun. But yeah, who doesn't want to work in that company? Like, it'd be really cool to be recognized like Patagonia is in our industry. So that's where a lot of it starts, is just kind of getting crazy with the ideas and looking at what others have done.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's fun about that is like once you have that very specific goal out there, you can start to track back like, okay, well, what are the components of that? As you said, like, they have, for a Patagonia, I mean, they're so well known as social justice leaders, climate justice leaders, really having this kind of very mission driven, um, almost like outspoken, they're
Yeah,
leaders in
sure.
that, in the outdoor industry. And they're always one of the first to put out like the amazing, ads, or their I love their worn wear program where they actually created a truck that travels the um travels the nation fixing old, not just Patagonia stuff, but anything. um the idea of like don't shop on Black Friday, all those kind of like cutting edge moments that make people go, oh wow, this company is not just bottom line driven. And then also product quality, that they also have amazing products that are very field tested and are known for that as well. And as you start to break down kind of, well, how do you get to those things and how do you create that kind of simultaneous culture of excellence in product, but also a strong mission oriented stance, it starts to kind of like tell you some of the areas where you need to be focusing, that I think if you don't state those things out loud, or you don't put them on paper and kind of put them out to your team, people don't really like even know where to put their energy. But it's like, well, if we want to be this, you almost have to start putting energy into some of those things.
Yeah, no, and it's like, where do we start with that first piece? And it's exciting. Like, I think about Patagonia. And my favorite story about that company is when it was a few years ago with, as like guys now, Wall Street guys and the tech guys, they're all in the Patagonia vest. I have one, the logo ones, and they said, we're not selling logo ones to Wall Street firms anymore because they don't align with our values. And I went, wow, the the chutzpah there to do that. But I admire the stance, because that's great. Visibility with those firms. They obviously spend a ton of money on that stuff, and they said, no, we're not going to take the money from companies like that. So just to see that consistency in the brand values to it, that,
Yeah.
and that may not speak to like the intangible value to on a business sale, but think about the loyalty that inspires in your clients who believe the same things, or your employees who want to know that you're not just, it's just not words on a wall. This is something that we truly believe in. We're actually taking actions.
Yeah.
So,
I was working with somebody at one point who had said that like your company values are only your company's values if you're willing to like lose something for them. Like they have to hurt you as well as help you. If they just are only, you know, allow you to say yes to everything, then they're not real guiding values. And I thought that was really powerful, because I think we often don't have those conversations internally of like, what will we say no to? You know, if we're focusing on this target customer, what does that mean that we're not going after? And I think for Patagonia, it's like saying no to something actually helps them double down on their core
Yeah,
and
no,
make them more valuable to the people who really truly care about them.
yeah. No, it was a pretty powerful thing. And of course, as a guy at first went, that's ridiculous. What are you doing? But as I thought it through and went, yeah, no, it aligns to their culture, it aligns to their brand. And, they're taking a stand on it. So whether I agree with it or not is irrelevant. It's kind of like when, we look at core values and we look at people who in our organization is aligned to our core values, and we can't have people who don't. They're doing the same thing with customers, which is, think about that, like from a value building standpoint, to be in a position where you can say, we're not going to do business with that company because we don't like the way they do business.
Yeah.
We know in small businesses, like, is the check going to clear? Are they going to pay quick? All right.
Yeah.
We need them, it's like we need the, dues money. So to be in that position, and they can be in that position because they built a great company with that brand.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I mean, in a way, that would be an interesting, BHAG for a company would be to be able to be selective. What would we need to do to be able to be selective in the companies that we're doing business with,
yeah.
or the customers that we're focusing on?
Well, we've done that. A few of our clients in their 3 or 5 year plans, we're only going to do business with companies we want to do business with. And we've had some who've gone through and actually applied the people analyzer, the core value component, and the get it, want it to their customers. And it, frankly, it's kind of scary when you see it done, because you go, God, like, how many of these companies did you not want to do business with, but you are?
Yeah.
So they start to try to narrow it down to the companies they really want to do business with. It makes life 1,000 times easier. And what's good too is the brand then starts to attract the companies you do want to do business with. So
Yeah.
those ones that didn't align with your core values and your brand, they stop coming to you.
Yeah, definitely. The like attracts like, I think, is totally true. And that's true whether you're a consumer brand or a B2B brand. It's like, the companies who, are watching, like the Telemon Insurances of the world, are the companies who are caring about their culture and wanting to be rock stars and kind of share those values. And so they're going to be the ones who, are going to see, their chief culture officer speaking, and are attracted to kind of what Kalina's putting out there, and the ones who really want the expert advising on their waterproofing are going to be looking for that, and the people who don't care about it are just going to go elsewhere, because that's not, they're either not in those conversations or they're not interested in those conversations. So I think even the idea of putting a conversation out there, making sure that people are talking about you when you're not in the room, automatically helps to get you that core customer who you like, and also that, will automatically take that core customer who's not really a fit for you off the table, just in and of itself.
Yeah. It's funny, the other part of it too is like what, using again Amplified and Telemon again an example. I talk to business owners all the time, and they'll be, oh yeah, who do you use for insurance or whatever. If they whoever they say that name, it's like if I ask who, they use for their marketing and branding, I immediately get impression of this company based on who they use for service providers. As ridiculous as it is, but those choices, impact other decisions. So it can be really powerful, because if I'm hearing, oh, we use 6 Point, okay, I know what kind of thinking goes into that company versus, somebody else.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, I never thought about that. But I mean, I think it's the same way that, like, when consumers are picking products, it's like you're a Starbucks person or you're a Dunkin' Donuts person or you're like a Blue Bottle coffee person, where it's like you're either, your values align with the, what I want people to say about me is related to that coffee cup that I'm holding. And I think it's interesting to think about it from the B2B perspective too, that like the companies that you do business with do speak to what you
Absolutely.
value or what your companies value. I think that we tend to try to think that those B2B relationships aren't as values driven or emotion driven, that it's just that there's business and then there's personal. And I know it's one of the things that we talk about people with all the time is, that we're all human and we're all buying on emotion, even if we like to think that we're logical. So
Oh,
yeah, really fascinating.
yep.
Okay, cool. Well, I think we will stop there and we'll
Okay.
continue the conversation next week. But thanks so much for those great examples. And
Problem.
yeah, look forward to it. Thanks so much, Michael. Have a great rest of your day.
You too, Megan.